are listening to The Audit, presented by IT Audit Labs. What sets us apart? We offer a full design framework tailored to your specific security needs that will reduce organizational risk and improve security posture. Contact IT Audit Labs and have us lead your team in outlining a strategic approach to remediate organizational risk. Today's episode, we will be talking to Jeff White of Cockroach. Cockroach DB is designed to survive software and hardware failures from server restarts to data center outages. Jeff will be giving us a demo and going in depth on Cockroach DB's services. Thanks for listening. Jeff, your time at Best Buy, you were working in or on databases and then somehow stumbled across Cockroach, which honestly I had never heard of until Gretchen said, hey, my husband works at Cockroach. Sounded like a really cool company and cool things that you guys were doing. So I was like, wow, we got to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I had worked at Best Buy first for Dell SecureWorks. Then I moved actually to another company at Best Buy, Verizon Enterprise Services, as a service delivery manager, helping run BestBuy.com. And then that was insourced, and a number of us became Best Buy employees. So for a while there, I was running all the data center type operations, more or less handing off from Verizon. And then there was a sort of a reorg. I had a fair amount of database experience. I'm not a DBA, but I've managed a lot of DBAs over the years. So we'll call it big database experience goes back all the way probably to like 97 when I started managing people who were managing Oracle. And then at U.S. Postal Service, I was managing USPS.com, which had, of course, a big database component there, which was also Oracle. Then later at Best Buy still has a fair Oracle install. And so one of the things I did at Best Buy was set up, engineered for them. I didn't do necessarily all the work, but I told them what I needed, was to build what's something called Oracle Maximum Availability Architecture, or MAA, which is where you have multiple rack clusters and they're synchronizing together, and then it was synchronizing to another rack cluster in another location, and it was very, very highly available. And that was necessary because if this database wasn't working, Best Buy couldn't take orders, which creates a lot of anxiety from everyone when you can't take orders.
Which from the consumer side, and this is outside looking in, I remember kind of that 20 teens era. Best Buy was having some issues in the holiday season keeping the website available for online orders as people were transitioning to more of that online platform versus the in-store platform. Yeah. Any truth to that?
Well, yes. Pre-COVID, we'll call it pre-COVID, we had, and lots of other e-commerce retailers had unfortunately trained their customers that the sales would all start at, let's say, midnight on Thanksgiving Day. So customers would all stampede into the website at 12:01 a.m. on Thanksgiving, and you would get this massive surge of activity. And so Best Buy learned, okay, first thing, don't tell them what time. That's the first thing. Do not tell them what time. And I remember, because when I was at Best Buy, we would watch our competitors. So for instance, I remember a few weeks before Black Friday announced that they were going to have all of their stuff on sale at 9 p.m. on the day before Thanksgiving, 9 p.m. You go to the website. And operations, that was us, we all looked at it and said, well, one of two things are happening. They're going down at 9:02 p.m. or they're going to stay up and we're going to have to try to make the website survive. Our website survive the same assault next year when our sales marketing people decide to call it time. Well, 9:02 p.m. Walmart.com died, which was totally predictable.
And you would think from a security perspective as well, it's like, well, okay, that's the time that we're going to DDoS them, right? If somebody wanted to be a malicious actor to disrupt their
Yes,
service.
Best Buy has a very sophisticated e-commerce pathway to get from the public to the actual website. So, for instance, everything has to flow through Akamai. If you get a bestbuy.com address, you'll actually see that it's Akamai. And then there was filtering and DDoS protection, et cetera, done by Akamai. Best Buy had been an Akamai customer for a long time. I'm sure they still are. So there was that level. And then the web security team, they would hold back fixes for bots and such until maybe an hour or two before they were going to have Black Friday. And then they would pull the trigger, and that was to buy themselves time from the, not necessarily bad actors, we'll call them the bots and such. They were the biggest threat from taking the site down. So the scale of some of these e-commerce sites is pretty surprising, the footprint on how big they would scale. Over 10,000 virtual machines, 10 to 20,000 virtual machines to try to sustain the website. And you had a very complex stack of interactions, and there was a learn by what failed. And one of the biggest barriers we had is to scale this Oracle database every year to try to take the assault. And that's the strange part is that you would spend 6 months of the year for, let's call it 15 minutes of workload. You're knob turning and scaling and testing to get through that 15 minutes. Our biggest challenge actually was PlayStation 5s and Xboxes. They caused about a year of heartburn to the point where I started calling them toxic waste. Like the amount of money that was spent trying to sell the darn things was certainly not equal to in my opinion, the money that was made selling them. I can remember at one sale we were having, it was there was over 1 million attempted orders per minute.
Wow. Just keeping track of that in the carts, who has it, all that would be pretty complex.
Well, these are attempted orders that we were blocking. 99.99% of them were being
bots
blocked.
And everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't scale to that size. You can't. There's just nothing you can do about it. So there was actually multiple layers of defense, threat intelligence and such like that. And then it got to be a secret on when we were going to put stuff for sale. And then we would do dumb things like get predictable.
I have to admit I was at least responsible for one of those 1 million attempted PS5 orders. And I would sign up for the Twitter alerts where people have their Twitter alerts.
I think it was it Wario? Yeah.
There were a lot of different Twitter, and then you could get the alerts and they would alert you when the sales went live on Best Buy or Walmart or whatever. Yeah.
It was always funny. They would enable the SKU to sell. We would have, because my team was running a database, so we would know the inventory that we're going to sell this many thousand. And, we would enable the SKU. And then it was always a joke to see how long will it take the internet to discover we have them for sale? And that was generally about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It would start, the flow would start. And then we would get smart. Like if you hit reload too often, like behaving like a bot, we'd start putting you into a penalty box. Like one strategy is we, early on, they discovered that the scalpers were actually drop shipping a scalped item basically from us. So they would buy it from us and they would have it shipped to someone they sold it to on eBay from us for, of course, far more. So then, of course, they changed it so you had to go to the store to pick it up.
Presumably, Jeff, that was before the cloud services had their scalable database architecture, Azure SQL or...
Those won't typically scale to the size we would need.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. At the time, we would self-host, even if we were running on AWS or Azure or wherever, we would be self-hosting. We run on our own virtual machines. We would run our database. Best Buy runs both in cloud and in the data center at the
Okay.
same time.
So then
And yeah.
how do you go from Oracle to
Mhm.
Cockroach? Was Oracle too expensive? Didn't scale well? What'd you find?
So Best Buy had been and still is a large user of Cassandra, which is a NoSQL eventually consistent database. It's a pretty good distributed database. It has a number of limitations which are challenging from an operational perspective, and they're also challenging from a programmer's perspective. In that you can only have one index. You can it is actually eventually consistent. So an eventually consistent, it's like a programmer asked me, well, when will it become consistent? And I would say eventually. And, that could be 1 second, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 3 days. I was tasked more or less at finding a distributed database like Cassandra that would be an ACID SQL solution. Most e-commerce sites have a desire, aspirational, or actual goal to survive, we'll call a regional failure of a cloud provider, such that like if AWS East goes down, all the workload goes west and we stay up and running. And you get into with something like Oracle from an operational perspective, you have normally a primary node or a primary group of nodes. All of the workload needs to go there. And if there's a problem in that set of one or more set of servers, you have to do a typically most sites would do a controlled manual failover. A lot of sites would not trust automation to do this, to make the right decision, because if the automation screws up, it can make it far worse. You see this with companies having disaster recovery tests. They'll do a DR test where they want to do a failover, and that's almost always revolving around the database, getting it to move workload from site A to site B and getting everything glued back and forth and everything up and running. So that's ugly part. Where Cockroach came in is I was trying to find a solution for that in our cloud providers. And I'm very familiar with clustering and shared storage, SANs and ASs, and you need some shared storage and replication. And I knew what sort of we'll call it angst that would create, and I wanted to avoid this angst. And so I started looking around for an alternative solution, and I came across this Cockroach database. And so I set it up on my Mac as a couple of containers and set up a kind of a virtual cluster. It took me about an hour to get going. And then I started poking at it, doing bad things to it, and it kept running. And it took me about 2 or 3 hours, and I thought, well, this is it. This is the solution. And we went from there.
Do you really need to concern yourself with disk resilience? So do you really need to run on anything, like a RAID 10, RAID 5? Because you're distributed, do you have to invest also in that SAN environment?
No, we don't need a SAN. We don't need a NAS. Although some customers for their self-hosted environments will choose to do that. In a cloud providers, we're just using standard SSD block storage. We do recommend SSD
Sure.
because SSD versus spinning disks. I don't know why you use spinning disks, but in 2023. But yeah, we just anticipate regular sort of, we'll call it just a generic machine, nothing particularly special.
So Jeff, if you had to describe what you're doing to like a 7-year-old,
A 7-year-old, okay,
or 10.
Getting them that PS5. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
yeah.
Besides that, could you give me the elevator pitch or just kind of a quick, blurb or paragraph on what you're doing?
So what I personally do is I manage a team of enterprise architects that help customers existing customers be successful with our product. And then I also do that role myself, and I also fill in a role as a customer success manager, where I kind of coordinate and work with the customers. So I work on the customer post-sale sides. I do some pre-sales, but mostly post-sales. As far as what the product does, it's essentially, your data store that we want to live up to our name, which is we're hard to kill. We want to be hard to kill, which is where the name comes from. You want your database to be able to survive bad things happening to it. Databases have a bad and probably deserved reputation for being brittle. And when the database fails, almost always the application is dead. It tends to be the real weak point in the application.
I like Cockroach better than dump truck, by the way. I think Cockroach.
It has an interesting reaction when you tell people the name. They either think that it's very black or white. They'll say it's, what a horrible name. Why would you call yourself that? Or, hey, that's a great name. And the positive part to it is that I've never seen anyone forget the name.
Jeff, for some reason, and maybe I have the wrong impression of Cockroach, but I'm picturing it widely distributed, almost like if you remember back in the late 90s, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and you could have 10,000 people working on a particular data set, right? And kind of the sum of all of these small parts made something big. Where is that similar in concept, where the data is spread wide but not very deep, or is it a smaller number of nodes but lots of data?
That's actually configurable by the customer or the database. Our default replica factor is 3. We're going to have 3 replicas. And I can kind of show you that here. So like this is actually a console of one of the nodes in the cluster. This was actually in my basement. One interesting thing about Cockroaches is all nodes are equal. Any node can handle any and every database transaction and operation. So the strange, like this console here is on every node in the cluster, the same console. You would see the same information. So if I go drill in here, so I have Europe and the United States. And if I drill into the US here, I've set up here in Minnesota, there's 4 nodes in my basement. And I've set up 3 nodes in AWS East 2, which is Ohio. And I've set up 3 nodes in East 1.
And it'll run on Windows, Unix, Linux.
Our primary platform is to run on Linux. We do release we do a Windows build, and most all of our development's really done on Macs. So we do a Mac build too. Windows is not really, we release a build, but we don't really support that for production. We lean more towards just running on Linux.
That's a great overview, Jeff. Really appreciate that. Can we pivot slightly and talk a little bit about solar? And maybe that's the wholly different episode, but I know you've done a little bit of work with solar, and just curious on your thoughts so far on your journey.
Jeff, real quick, did your mind immediately go to Apache Lucene and solar before it went to solar power?
It actually did, because I used to have to, that when I was at Best Buy, solar was one of the databases we did run. So I
saw the wheels turning. I thought maybe that's where they were
going. I went there right away. But I did actually have, I'm sure my wife talked about it, had solar panels installed December of all things this last year, which was kind of nuts. They actually shoveled the roof off, and they must have spent half a day. It's been pretty good. I'm fairly pleased with it.
Was it what you expected from the research you had done to what it was in practice?
Yeah, it was pretty much on what I thought it would be. to some degree, it's always too expensive. You're always kind of like, oh, this was expensive. But in this case, it's like, okay, it doesn't raise my property taxes. It adds value to the house. So it's kind of an asset, and it kind of effectively makes money every month, and it's going to last unless the house gets destroyed, 20 plus years. So it's sort of, if there's anything I regret, it's not actually putting up a few more panels on the side that gets more shade.
You'll truly be able to be off grid, where you charge those batteries up during the day and then use them when it's dark.
Kind of my plan is it might be to do the opposite, which is change the power meter to time of day billing. I did also buy an electric vehicle.
How do you like it?
Well, it's pretty much everything I expected. It's actually, I mean, it's after you drive an electric vehicle, internal combustion vehicles are kind of like, this is dumb. I mean, just ignore the the whole environmental, left, right, the whole political thing around it. It's like internal combustion cars are not very good vehicles compared to an electric vehicle. I mean, an electric vehicle, if you're just we'll call it a pure motorhead, which they don't really, well, they do have electric motors in them, but if you're a pure motorhead, like this car it's got torque up the wazoo, it has no transmission, and it doesn't even probably have a differential, and you push down the accelerator and it goes like a bat out of hell. So, and it brakes well. Like that's another weird thing you got to get used to is like braking. You don't really brake. And then the cost, which is another thing, which I think is going to be the killer behind why electric vehicles will take over everything, is that the best part is no part. And if you look at the number of parts differences between an electric car and an internal combustion engine car, it's like, well, I don't have any of these parts. I bought the car and the dealer said, well, you get free oil change. And then they jokingly said, like, you need one.
Well, that's good. You've had a good experience then so far with the solar panels.
Yeah, the solars worked well. I can be nerdy and watch it up to the set. I actually have a tool that's watching the power consumption on the actual power feeds. So it's kind of entertaining. My roof's not really kind of optimal for solar production, but I on paper have a 10 kilowatt, but I've never seen it get above 8. But that's mostly the angle and the direction of the sun. Again, the roof's not really, was never designed for it, so I take what I get. But it's certainly like May was cool. So we didn't really run any air conditioner, and our electric bill went negative for May. So I was pretty happy with that.
Nice.
Because I was getting kind of tired of paying Excel.
Yeah.
What do they pay back these days for net metering for negative balances?
They pay back what they charge you.
They do? Okay. I thought it was less, maybe.
Well, they tack on a bunch of fees, of course, per kilowatt, which you don't get paid for. So it's it's technically what they charge for you. It's kind of funny. The electrician for the company I had the panels installed with, he was jokingly saying, well, Excel's going to hate you now. And he jokingly, and he was kind of serious. He says, Excel views all the solar panel owners as the enemy.
That's what all the YouTube ads I get these days tell me. Like, hey, you know what Excel's doing to you? You can stick it to them if you just take out this big loan.
Well, there's some truth to that. And the third back from Uncle Sam is a big factor. I'm actually having a look at putting a heat pump in, replacing our furnace with a heat pump, and then a heat pump hot water heater. I don't think we'll do that. Again, the government is going to give you a third back, so 30% back. So it's like, well, we'd kind of be dumb not to. That's the way I look at it with the solar panels is like, how many places could you go buy something, a box, that pays 10 to 15% back a year and lasts 20, 25 years? And the government will give you 30% back for buying the box. Wouldn't your question be, how many boxes can I buy? I mean, that's kind of where we're at. When you look at it from purely financial perspective, it's like this is a pretty good investment.
Purely financial, you would think the best place to put it would be on open land, so that you didn't have the costs incurred on the roof, and then you could sell it back, 3-4 times over.
Well, it's I think it's going to be a little interesting with Minnesota. They grow a lot of corn to sell as ethanol,
right?
Which is I think mathematically is a loser. Like the amount of energy it takes to grow the corn,
right,
harvest the corn, turning it into ethanol is more fuel it took to do that. So it's actually a net loss. You get into the same question is why would I grow corn there when I could put some solar panels out on that field and don't require any maintenance and don't require any planting or anything like that, and doesn't care if it rains or not. Why wouldn't I do that?
I thought they were using the diesel, though, essentially to use it for a generator that produced electricity.
Yes. So they're diesel electric locomotives. So the diesel is just a prime mover generating electricity. There's electric motors, which I tell people, if you don't think an electric motor can pull a lot, look at a locomotive. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know this. There used to be a electric railroad that went through Idaho, over the Rockies and over the Cascades, that was created around 1905 and existed until 1970s, and it was electrified. It was the Milwaukee Road was electrified over the Rocky Mountains, and they were electrified for efficiency, and so they didn't create forest fires from steam locomotives.
Oh.
And again, 1905, they had fully electric mainline freight line. So if someone says if someone thinks they can't do it, they did it a long time ago.
I think that's the same thing with the cars too, right? One of the first cars was all electric. Oh boy, well, cool. We covered a lot of stuff today, Jeff. Thanks for coming on. I do want to thank Jeff, and Jeff, we'll send you a little something here too, to say thanks for coming on. And we do a game night every so often where we play some board games like Coup and Resistance and just some other fun stuff like that. So we'll let you know the next time we play. We're right downtown St. Paul. But it'd be cool to have you over.
I'll ask Gretchen if I can be invited or not, because she might not want me there. She likes having her tribe.
The more the merrier, I say.
We need a new place though, Eric. Allery's shut down now, so we're shopping for a new spot.
I think we could go to the office now. We're just about ready.
There you go.
IT Audit Labs is a team of professionals that assess security risk and compliance. Our threat assessments find the soft spots before the bad guys do. Whether you are looking for a point solution or a broader security program, contact IT Audit Labs to reduce your organizational risk. Thanks to our producer, Joshua J. Schmidt, and our audio-video editor, Cameron Troy Hill.